Moin and Gluten Tag, I'm excited because I feel today the dough game is strong.
Are you also as obsessed as I am by creating a lot of oven spring and having that beautiful ear during the bake? If you are, then you want to make sure that you step up your dough proofing game. With proper proofing, you will go from a rather flat bread like this to beautiful oven spring. But first, to get your appetite a little bit going, let's have a look at the bread that we will have at the end of this video. Now, I will be having a look at shaping a sourdough bread, and then afterwards I will guide you through the whole proofing process. And for proofing, there are different strategies which I will also be discussing in this video. I'll be showing you the shaping process as well because I feel it's an essential part to make sure that your dough holds together very well. Now, you also don't want to shape your dough too tight because that means that you would be degassing your dough. Depending on how tight you shape, you will either have smaller pockets of air or larger pockets of air inside of your bread, which are also called alveoli. What large bakeries will do is they will bulk ferment their dough and then they will cut their dough into smaller pieces. This is called pre-shaping. Now you will end up with squares or not round looking pieces of dough. That's why you have to pre-shape. Being a hobby baker, however, I just bake one dough at the same time and then you can just skip that pre-shaping process. Now, if you feel that you have too big pockets of air inside of your dough, which in my opinion is always something very beautiful to have large pockets of air, good signs of fermentation, then you might want to consider pre-shaping. But it's also relatively difficult to do and challenging, especially if you start with baking. And that's the reason why I'm going to skip that. I'm going to shape my dough directly out of the container. And enough talking now, let's get started with the shaping. This is the dough that I've been fermenting for around 6 hours. It's relatively warm, so fermentation is a little quicker than usual. You can see some nice pockets of air, and let's get started and just shape this dough. Just going to flip this container over and hopefully it will come right out. That's a sign that you built enough strength and your dough is not over fermented. Et voila! Now I just like to tuck a little more flour below. And now what I will do is I will just take this dough and fold it over itself. Like this. Don't tuck it down too much, else you are losing some of that precious air that you have added to your dough. I'm tucking this down now so that this sticks together. Now I will rotate this, put some more flour below, and I will just start rolling this dough up. Push inside, roll. Good looking dough. Just only going to seal this. I feel that makes it a little more beautiful dough. Okay. Turn this around. And one thing, I used a little more flour. That makes the shaping a little bit easier, but then this makes this a little harder. All right, so this is the dough. After shaping, I like to cover it in a plastic bag, which keeps the whole dough hydrated. Now, the dough is not ready. We have to wait until it proofed. And now after shaping, the proofing stage starts. If you've done everything right until this moment, then you also have to master this stage. It's essential for giving you that oven spring and that ear in the end during the baking process. And I will now be discussing 4 different options for different proofing techniques. Now each method has their advantages and disadvantages, which I will also be discussing. First up, method number 1, that's the room temperature proofing. This is probably the easiest and most ancient way how bread has been proofed. This method is very simple and works very well for those that are not that high in water content. So what you pretty much do is after shaping, you just leave your dough at room temperature. You use your finger to determine whether your dough proofed enough. At the start, after shaping, the dough is still relatively stiff because you created all that strength. Over time, your dough is going to inflate more, and then you can use your finger to measure how much your dough actually inflated. You just take your finger and you poke into the dough. Look out for a dent. That dent should very slowly recover. Then your bread is proofed. If your bread is not proofed enough, then that dent is going to recover very quickly. If your bread is overproofed, well, then that dent stays in there. If you overproofed, you screwed up. If you did not proof long enough, you're not going to get that oven spring as well. So it's really about hitting that sweet spot. It sounds so simple, but yeah, just finger poke your dough. That's going to make such a big difference. Now, what I personally don't like about this method is it works very well for rather stiff doughs. Now, if you want to increase your dough hydration, then you will have an issue in the end when you want to bake your bread, because it's very hard to score a bread which is at room temperature, and this method assumes that your dough is all the time at room temperature. If you have a rather stiff dough, then this is definitely a great option. When your dough passed the finger poke test, directly bake it. Now this brings me to option number 2, which is very different. You take your dough and you proof your dough in the fridge for around 18 to 24 hours. Now, how long definitely depends on the temperature inside of your fridge, and it even depends on which level you put your dough into the fridge. This is a great way because you can also choose the moment when you want to bake your bread. With the room temperature finger poke test, you have to bake your bread right away. With the fridge technique, it doesn't matter really if it's 1 hour or 2 hours later. That's because the fermentation activity is still quite active at the start, but over a period of time it almost becomes completely zero. Now, there's a big difference between 6 degrees Celsius and 4 degrees Celsius. That's something I definitely learned myself. I recommend you to try 18 hours first inside of your fridge. And then if you feel it's not proofed enough, you don't get enough oven spring, try 24 hours inside of your fridge. What I don't like about this method is that it's very hard to say whether your dough is actually done proofing or not. For sure, you can look at did it increase in size or not. But still, with the finger poke test, it's so much easier. You just poke your dough and you know it's ready. And this leads me to number 3, which is the method which I developed, which is you take your dough, you proof it at room temperature, and you do the finger poke test. Now, shortly before your dough passes the finger poke test, you take your dough and you move your dough to the fridge. You move your dough to the fridge for another 8 hours approximately. This way, you know your dough is definitely ready after 8 hours, and you also saw, okay, the fermentation has been going according to plan. The downside of this is that, well, if you wait longer than 8 hours, you don't have that room like you have on the full fridge strategy. You can easily over-ferment your dough. Also, those 8 hours depend a lot on your fridge. This is just a recommendation from my fridge, which is around 6 degrees Celsius on top and 4 degrees Celsius near the bottom area. So what I typically do is, before going to bed, I proof my dough, and then I might go to bed, and then 8 hours later or so, I already have the oven preheated in the morning, and that's when I'm going to bake my bread. This really helped me to bake better results consistently. This is typically my method of choice. Yeah, summing it up, it's combining the best of both worlds, room temperature proofing and the cold proofing. One thing to also add to the equation, when it's colder, your fermentation produces different enzymes. And this means when proofing cold, it could be that the taste is different of your bread. This is also something to consider. So how do you want to taste to develop? So there's one more method, method number 4, and that's a method somebody of you suggested to me in the comments. And this method is a little bit simpler than the fridge, because what you do is you just proof your dough at room temperature. And then in the end, when your dough almost passed the finger poke test, what you do is you take your dough and you place it in the freezer for another 30 minutes. I gotta say, this sounds pretty cool because I feel it's also going to combine the best of both worlds. You can bake your dough almost directly and you can control the fermentation process and feel how it progressed with your finger. So I already tested in my fridge, it's around -20°C. So the pros of this method are you can definitely bake your bread way faster in comparison to the fridge method. However, a possibly negative side could be that you're not developing that flavor that you would like. However, this is also personal preference. So in the end, yes, there's a lot of techniques. Let's put the last method, which I never tried, to the test, and let's have a look whether this is going to work out or not. I'm really hoping for some great oven spring. And this is the dough after I shaped it. Just use your finger and poke your finger into the dough, and you will see that this then almost instantly springs back. So this dough is not yet ready. It still requires more proofing. I know that in my case, depending on my setup, this dough is ready after around 2 hours. But this really depends on your environment. So I would recommend you to check this once every 15 minutes. And that's what I'll be doing next. I will be showing you how this dough develops over time. It's actually been a little more than 50 minutes. It's been 30 minutes, but let's have another look. Try to use an area where there's some flour, and you can see how that still springs back very fast. So I would say most important is the first start of the springing back, because that reminds a little bit of a dent. That's okay, but you can see how fast this is still going back here, and in a minute or so this dent is going to be completely gone. So yeah, still needs more time. Oh well, it's been another hour, not 50 minutes, I guess. Yeah, well, you have to make the process work if you're just a hobby baker, right? So yeah, let's have a look at the dough and see how well it proofed by now. It definitely already expanded quite a lot. I'm just putting some flour on my finger. Yeah, I feel... This is already very close. I would already feel comfortable in baking this, I think. Let's try one more time. Let's try here. Yes. You see this dent stays, right? You see how much those dents stay? I would be comfortable with baking this now. So yeah, so what I will be doing now is then I will proceed and I will do the freezer trick. And yes, I've waited for another minute and you can see that those dents are still in there. So this is definitely good. This is definitely proofed. So yeah, finger poke test says, please bake this right now. So one more time, the freezer trick. We're now going to take this and we will put this into our freezer. And this way the outside of the dough is cooled down, and that's going to make it a little easier to score. Now, I would say there's a time window of maybe 30 minutes or so until overproofing. If I were to be baking this at room temperature, I might wait another 15 minutes. Definitely by now I would turn on the oven. So yes, let me put this into the freezer for 30 minutes. And while it's being put into the freezer, I will already be starting my oven. I'm gonna make this one inside of a Dutch oven. So yeah, that also needs some preheating. I will do that right now. Fridge temperature is -26 Celsius. And now the dough temperature is this. I'm really wondering what's going to happen within 30 minutes.
Bye bye, Mr. Dough.
While we are waiting, I got a bread joke for you. What do you call a grumpy bread? Sourdough. Okay, I'm out of here.
Whoops.
Come out here. And it didn't increase that much more in size. And surface temperature is around 10 degrees. So that cooled down not that much, but quite a bit. I'm sure it's gonna be easier to score now. Okay, I'm confident. All right, I like this technique. I just placed the Dutch oven on here. I can just flip this around. This is very gentle on the dough. This is a great way to use a Dutch oven. I'm using a Dutch oven, but there's also other steaming techniques. I'm going to be linking one right here. Now it's time to score our bread. So this is looking good. We can correct it just a little bit. Perfect. I'm now going to close the Dutch oven. Close it. And I like to just spray in a little more. More water. More water for extra steam. And bear with me, I'm gonna be showing you the result in a bit. One more side note, now that you did your proofing just right, this is where everything comes together. And to get that extra bit of oven spring, it's essential to have a lot of steam during the first half of the bake. That's around 20 to 25 minutes, depending on your setup. And as I said, there is really no need to get a Dutch oven. You can do everything with your home oven. It's just that a Dutch oven makes it a little bit easier from time to time to bake. But yeah, you can definitely bake amazing sourdough without a Dutch oven, without investing in expensive equipment. While we are waiting, just a quick explanation. You might have noticed that on my videos I'm always saying moin. And just a quick background info of what this is about. This is actually the greeting that we are using in the northern part of Germany. We say moin. You can also say guten Tag, which means good day. But moin is a typical greeting for the northern part of Germany. And we would never say moin moin. Some people come to Hamburg and they say moin moin. But nope. We Hamburgians are very, very distant. And we would never say a word too much. So we just say moin. So if you're coming to Germany next time, try using moin on some people. They will think you are from the north. One thing though, which I love about baking using a Dutch oven, you always have this one moment of excitement during half the bake where you open the Dutch oven and it's either an epic fail or it's a great success. Drum roll, are you as excited as I am? It's been 25 minutes. Let's have a look. The moment of truth. And booyah! Amazing. Look at that nice ear. Wow.
This unfortunately brings us to the end of this video. I hope you learned something new. I definitely did. It's been a lot of fun. Happy baking and may the gluten always be with you.